my presentation. What I want to emphasize here is that this is an invitation. So probably the prompt is have an open-minded for this. What I'm presenting today is a number of collaborations, and probably some of you are familiar with the first one, which is this systematic assessment of the empirical work in that intersection of mental health, well-being, and nature. One that is kind of my pioneering work, but now I'm in the point where I am systematizing this information, is about depression among indigenous peoples in the Ecuadorian highlands. And the project that I'm conducting now, and basically I just arrived from Bolivia, passing from Ecuador, and after spending also about a month in Peru. So lots of field work. This collaboration is larger with scientists and academics also in Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. So you're seeing some familiar names over there. It's because we have UPM people in these teams. And this is the work. It's open access. It's available. Some of you have seen it. This, I would say, was a massive effort because we ended up analyzing 174 articles, and this article only relates to the more demographic piece, the ethnicities, and the plurality piece, which is what ontological and epistemological systems we are using to navigate in the field. So we are presenting in this paper only about that piece, but we basically systematize the profiles of these 174 articles. So we have even levels of education, poverty, and so on. So there's still a lot of work to do out of this. For this article, the questions were very simple. Who are the people participating in these studies? Where are they? And the results were impressive. So this work took massive traction in media. So out of the sudden, and this is just a sample, out of the sudden we were like having these interviews, and probably it is due to it became a hot bomb to say, well, what we know about the field is probably quite limited, because most of this work is done in the Western world. Some of this work is done in Asian countries, and almost none of this work is done elsewhere. Being a person working in applied research, a lot of my work is public health, actually. I know that we conduct work in the global south. I know that when we have like wicked problems like chronic malnutrition, there are the funds to do that type of work. But this type of work is not actually done in the global south. That entails a huge problem, because we know that in terms of psychologies and behavior in general, there is a wide variety among human societies. So not that this research is wrong, it's just limited, and we have to cross the borders. So that's probably the reason of why this became media relevant. One of the things that we found that is striking is that 107 studies didn't report the ethnicity of their participants. So we have 174 articles, and this massive number didn't report. So part of the problem is we are not acknowledging that we think differently across the world. And these are like infographics, you can see it by design. And more or less, we arrived to the same conclusions, even the number of participants that are defined as white Caucasians, It's this number. And D is interesting because D represents indigenous people. But this is basically inflated by two studies. One in Canada and New Zealand that have this public policy that is placing more emphasis on the representation, inclusion of indigenous populations. So this number basically represents two studies, but the formula they use is more of the same. So again, we are not solving the problem. And here, this is a graphical exercise, a little bit of kind of a test to graphically explore a concept that Wade Davis used, and we are naming in the article, which is the ethnosphere. I don't know if you are familiar with that concept. You're probably familiar with the concept of ecosphere or biosphere. Yeah, we're at the gun, so it's very likely that all of you are familiar with that concept. Point here is, in the same way that Charles Darwin describes like all the living processes on the face of Earth, like an entanglement of relationships, of processes, something similar happens with cultures. So David says something like, all the dreams from the past, present, and future on the face of Earth, that is the atmosphere. This complex of cultural things. And most of the time, because globalization is a powerful force, most of the time, the way we are navigating, exploring realities, and that is what happens with these studies, is basically just a segment, and it's really hard even for most of us to process the other ways of understanding, of seeing things, and that is a challenge. Now, this research, as I was trying to say when I also add collaboration number 2, this didn't come out of nowhere. Like this has a history of how I arrived to this type of work. So this is 2007. Actually, this was published in 2007, but I started this work in 2005. As Aura said in my introduction, my background, my BA is in psychology. When you study psychology in places like Ecuador, one of the first things you learn is that all the psychometric tools that we use for measuring intelligence, motivation, and so on are developed in the Western world, with white populations. So we have to go through validation of these tools. So that's something that we learn in the career very early. Okay, we have to validate these things. Then I was thinking, but what about if something like the expression of distress, of infirmity, like a mental health condition, is expressed differently in different populations? I was in a qualitative research course working with indigenous leaders. Seeing this perspective, we had a lot of time to interact, to share, and I was thinking like, probably it's different. So I started a journey trying to understand depression in the highlands of Ecuador. And something that I want to point out in terms of that experience, which is almost 20 years ago, this is not a journey of knowledge. This is a journey about like slightly advancing in like kind of like, how to say, it is an ignorance, like changing or slightly advancing in my own ignorance about this. So that is the type of journey. So this was the first research, this is about aging, and aging studies tell us so much about human psychology. It's unbelievable. This was also a relatively large study in the highlands of Ecuador, and things like my identity as an older adult is based on my possibility of being part of the community, of collaborating, of being able to serve the others. That's something we in the Western world we it's really hard to grasp that forms of defining the identity, and that is the type of things that we learn out of these studies. Or this is about intercultural pregnancy. And just an anecdote, we had a person translating the interviews, and people, indigenous women, would say, I prefer to deliver on the dirt floor. But the translator was saying, I prefer to deliver in the floor. And it's not the same. It's not the same, this floor, than the dirt floor. In the dirt floor, there's a relationship. It's not just a thing, an object. And it has properties, because indigenous people are very pragmatical at the end. Their way of thinking is also expressed empirically, concretely, in actions. So they have a set of, like a pit of fire that warms the soil, that is paddy. So it produces something that is also emotionally comforting. But still, the person that did the translation didn't catch that. When I was doing this research, there was a young leader telling me, you know what, I'm here working in front of my computer, and I have time to think. And sometimes I feel bad. I get anxious about things. I get depressed sometimes. When you are in the community, when you are in that interaction, you are in the doing, you are constantly, there's something happening all the time. You're never alone. You're always accompanied, because you are even accompanied by the mountains. If I am hot, I will dig my feet inside the dirt, and that will cool me down. If I am cold, I will dig my feet into the dirt, and that will keep me warm. So the connection, the relationship is so strong, so powerful. Conclusions of my 2007 study. We have to make the effort to think how this thing of the relationship, mental health, well-being, nature, operates in communities that are eco-communalist, not individualistic, not egocentric. And the other thing, community is a protective factor. We know now that through the blue zone studies. So we know, again, aging studies are very important to teach us things. The blue zone studies are basically aging studies that look at populations that are healthy around the planet. So Sardinia, Okinawa, and what they are looking in these populations, they are seeing that these populations have vigorous lifestyles, so they are constantly exercising. They work the land, so most of these populations are engaged in some time of agricultural work. They have a lot of community time, and those are the factors. These populations in the Andes, they behave in the same way. And community is really strong as a protective factor. As I was saying, with depression, it's really hard to note in indigenous populations, because you won't see phenomena that we see in the Western world, like somebody with a major depression might go into the bed and won't wake up, will stay there. And it doesn't matter if the world is falling into pieces. That is the nature of depression. That is why it's one of the most disabilitating conditions on the world. It basically is as disabilitating as advanced stages of cancer. So then depression is a big thing. However, in the context of communities, they say something. Either you stand up or the community will raise you up. And they would say, for good or for bad. Because in the Andean world, as much as these can seen as very romantic, it's not that romantic. They are not exactly romantic. They are very clear on how things are balanced. They know that Mother Nature, Earth, can be also, what would be the word, like furious, might react, might be angry. It's not just a romantic, peaceful relationship. It is a complex relationship, but the fundamental thing, it is a deep relationship. And they don't want to be neither like happy people just like singing and dancing. That is not how they define their own psychology. They define their own psychology in terms of balance, having both things, having a balance between emotions, cognitions, and actions. So with all these background, we have engaged in this study. This, I believe, is the largest study so far. We have three countries that largely represent Andean cultures. This is the Tawantinsuyo, basically represents the extension of the Inca Empire. And the Incas were very efficient in terms of how they were connecting the communities. They absorb / conquer. They build roads. So this is the Capac Ñan, the main road. Ñan means road or path, and language. That's why all the populations that have participated in this work are Kichwa speakers, Kichwa or Quechua speakers. And language is a very important thing to understand the issue in here. And yeah, something that was like also a challenge is to shape the design after consultative meetings with the stakeholders in the three countries. And the decision making for this was really critical. For example, I was tempted to include Aymara population in Bolivia, for example. Now, after being in Bolivia for a while and working with the communities, that would have been a huge mistake because we have different psychologies there. The Quichuas are more or less homogeneous, still very heterogeneous, but there are core values, core things that are very similar. And we have something that is quite interesting, which is this Delphi style. I will try to summarize the design of this work. So we have a panel with 17 people. The panel acts as a panel of experts. They go in rounds analyzing different constructs. So we have identity, cultural landes, mental health, well-being, depression, anxiety, stress. So three major mental health constructs. And then we have these community-based views. So far, 20 focus groups and 12 key informant interviews in the three countries, and discourse analysis with 57 sources. The inclusion criteria for the discourse analysis was relevance to the theme, and that each source has to be has to tap in at least two constructs of the ones that we are analyzing. So an article that speaks about cosmovision was not good enough. It had to be cosmovision and well-being. So that, and that's how we ended with 57 sources. And because this is discursive analysis, we have several types of sources, including websites, reports, articles, books. So this is the design. The panel is analyzing round 2. In the meantime, we have the discourse analysis, and then we have the community views. And the panel will have the task of analyzing in round 3 everything. So these people in here, several are academics. You probably are familiar with Egle that was in here. They have the huge task of doing in round 3, like the final analysis of all these bodies of information. And you can imagine this is massive. So my head is still spinning with all of these. And they will of course participate as co-authors. So I wanted to briefly tap on the promotion plan because this is important. And this also comes out of a lot of conversations happening in the Andes. What to do with this information? One thing is, okay, I'm in academia, I'm a scientist. Why don't we try to place this information in a huge bedding? And this is also an issue of epistemological justice. And Lancet has recognized that there has been epistemological injustice in public health work. So this is a good excuse. And we also have something that the spearheads this, saying like, we have a huge problem of diversity and pluralism, and we have something in here. Structure the information would be a massive challenge. I've been working for weeks in trying to do that. I'm still there. Something that is totally accessible for Latin Americans. But then how you return to the communities? And that is probably the most complex and will be the most time-consuming task, to return the information, to return the things. And it's not paying back, because paying back implies a debt. And this is not a debt, because this is participatory work. This is a collaboration. We are working together. How do we share this thing that we're working together? And this is the transmedia storytelling. So I have told every single community I have discussed these issues, let's have this commitment of sharing this, of doing something about this. So there's plenty of work here. The model for working on these things, emotion, cognition, behavior, and probably you're familiar with this guy. In Spanish, we said René Descartes, but here's René Descartes. Hopefully is the right pronunciation. Because yeah, he's probably in partially responsible of this divide, mind and body, that actually hunts dramatically public health and environmental sciences. We know through neuropsychology and psychology that emotion comes first. First, we feel something, then we interpret that, and it might translate into behaviors. For the Andeans, this is so interesting because they have the picture so much clearer in that sense. The emotions, then the whole system of cognition that is also modeled after the symbolic fabric, language, rituals, customs, and then the behavior. Because for Andeans, always these realms have to become something inconcrete, something tangible. So there is always a behavior happening after this. And as I said, this is the challenge, like linking these things together and showing how these three things interact in very concrete actions, like how the ecosystem is managed, how the diets take place, why the vigorous lifestyles are important, and so on. And all of these things are planetary health critical issues. Preliminary findings. I don't have the expectation that you fully grasp this in the same way that for indigenous communities in rural Andes, it's hard to understand us. It is, I am assuming that it will be hard for you to understand this. And I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly okay. Preliminary findings. relationship. Relationship is the most critical part. Everything is relationship, everything is process. Pachamama at the core. And Pachamama is not one thing. Let's say for the time being, Mother Earth. The Apus and other entities. The Apus are the mountains, the spirits of the mountains. And I always had that from previous research, the Apus. But after this research, I have way more clear the relationship with these entities. As I was saying, feeling, thinking, action, symbolic to concrete. There's always something has to happen to solve things. That's why sometimes that thing that will happen is a ritual. Sometimes it's going to the neighbor and solve a problem, solve an issue that two neighbors might have. So they are always solving things in very concrete ways. If you are operating like this, based on relationship, placing Pachamama, the whole, so they are not separating anything. They are seeing everything as integrated and in wholeness. They have a clear codification of feelings, thinking, and action. They have consciousness about where they are. We most of the time we associate practice like meditation or mindfulness with Asians. The Andeans do it. The Andeans are constantly meditating on site. They are paying attention to what's going on. And that's why for millennia, they have been really effective in understanding ecological cues, biomarkers. They have observed, that's why they have really efficient ways of intercropping or company. These people in here, this is Cusco, this is a Quechua speaker community. They are growing potato, but they don't have one variety of potato. They have like 10 different varieties of potato, and they're planting all together because they're saying, this is a community. They have to be in relationship. They have to be together. The practical thing is that it's really efficient for pest control. If they have environmental phenomena, some of these varieties might survive. The sense of community. Again, how can we go with egocentric tests to try to measure the phenomena in communities that are totally communalist? I will just provide a quick example. This you can read. It's probably a more digestible way of talking about language. This is publishing this, the importance of Latin American scholarship and practice for the relational turn. This is talking why to love cannot be just a feeling. To love is also an action. If you love somebody, you take care of that person. You don't just say that you take care. You have to actually take care of that person. If you love the person, this one, makicha nitai. If you have a child and the child hurt his hand, the person would say, makicha nitai. And they're saying, you hurt your hand, my hand. I feel your pain because we are connected. It's so powerful. This is a clear example of the idioms of distress. Yaki is being sad. Depression exactly in the way we know in the DSM, the diagnosis manual, it's not exactly the same in indigenous communities. But if you think on the context of history, yakichik is detriment, damage. So usually depression comes for something that is major, that is affecting the community, that is affecting the territory. Exploitation, like the mines in Potosi, that was probably one of the more dramatical episodes in the history of colonization in South America. Yakichik, Guayapiruna, ways of exploitation, and this is the colony. So it is structural towards the end. And here, as I was saying, Pachamama is the core. And the way they are understanding in Andes, this idea of planetary health, that the things are related, that if we damage the ecosystem, we might experience the effects of that damage. in their view, that is so crystal clear, because everything is about balancing. Yeah, I'm almost done. Everything is about balancing. So Pacha is balancing. Pachamama is Mother Earth. Kichwa is polysemantic. So Pachamama is the chakra, like polycultural garden, is the landscape, the territory, is Mother Nature, Mother Earth, is the universe, is time, is everything. Again, language is so fundamental. And out of this complex thing that I did my best to explain this thing, one of the things that really made me think out of this fieldwork, this trip, was a COVID example. I was working with a Quechua medical anthropologist, and I was saying, like, but this thing I was mentioning, how is structural, how is even depression can be shared in the community. Have you seen this? And this folks says, well, during COVID-19, a community I work with got depressed. Was it because of COVID? No, it was because they were forced to stay in their homes. What caused the depression? Being insulated there alone? Not exactly. They were not able to manage their land. And that is what was causing the deepest frustration and the source of their sadness. Because they were not able to go and do the things to clear the paths, the irrigation channels, and the ecosystem was kind of collapsing because they were not, I was saying, the feeling, the cognitive, and the concrete actions, they were not able to go into the concrete part. So that was the source of their distress, not being able to do something, to stay with this connection, and this connection where you have to perform things to keep it healthy. So in the summary that you probably read for this talk, the thing is criar la vida, to take care of life. So that is something that is embedded. When I said resiliency strategies, it is because the total motivation is how to balance things, how to keep things healthy, in balance. If you are not able to keep the things in balance, then you can experience this depression, this distress. Planetary health problem, as I said, mental health issues are huge. Mental health is not a construct that is necessarily understood for all the communities. In the same way that we want to compartmentalize, to divide everything for many communities, that idea of dividing things into boxes is total nonsense, but it is becoming a thing. So stress, most of the people associated with the problem of the city. Hegemony of knowledge, as you saw in the assessment, we are using kind of a very limited spectrum of tools, way of seeing, understanding things, to interpret the reality of millions of people. Only in the Andean region, we have 50 million people self-defined as indigenous. Modernization is a huge thing. Here are a few reflections about why the race of mental health issues is associated with urban lifestyles. And these are three different and current studies. So with this work is also turning the things around. Say, okay, what we're saying is that if you are in a city, you're a city dweller. If you go to nature, you get the benefits of nature. What about when your ecological agroecosystem is threatened by urbanization, is threatened by migration, by population aging? What are the effects of that? How this will impact on the lives of these communities that are so ingrained, so integrated with their territory. And the very final reflections is we need to fulfill that piece. So there's plenty of work to do on this. I probably throw several reflections for you. There's work to do to systematize, to organize the information in a way that can be also a learned lesson for the Western world. And if we learn from both sides, we have magnificent opportunities. Tinkui is exchange, but with respect and reciprocity. For probably, it was hard to digest the amount of information presented. It is hard for me to systematize this and to present it, but that is the challenge, and that's something that has to be done. We have these large international platforms like IPBES or the EPCZ. We're saying indigenous people are critical to fight against climate change, to carbon sequestration. Hardly we take the time to go in deep to understand the reasons. It's not just instrumental. It's not just about enhancing an ecosystem. I mean, we have research about that. We know that an ecosystem with indigenous tribes in the Amazon is not the same that without. We know there is a system of knowledge in place. They are enhancing those ecosystems. And that has happened through millennia. Hardly we take the time to understand the deep reasons, the reasoning. And again, we go with our egocentric tools and try to capture this reality. That's simply impossible. We are not paying enough attention, and this is fundamental. So this work that has to be done, final reflection. And yeah, my gratitude because so many people involved in this work. And yeah, I think that there's still some time for questions.